The actual document DOJ signed, Merrick Garland signed, appointing David Weiss, saying how limited is it? And it's not very limited. It basically says anything to do with the Hunter Biden investigation, which is quite broad. And Kara's right. Now that David Weiss has been named special counsel, he does have a bit more independence. It's not all that different from being a U.S. attorney, but he does have a bit more independence, separation from the attorney general. My big question, again, is why? Why now? Why in the case that's been going on for 5 years, 4 days ago, there was no need for special counsel. Now there is. And what DOJ said is the reason is, quote, extraordinary circumstances. Now that's pulled out of the law. What's extraordinary now that wasn't extraordinary 5 weeks ago when they were ready to go in court and wrap this up for a misdemeanor? So DOJ has botched this, in my view. Merrick Garland has botched this. And frankly, the way this has played out has actually lent credence to what the whistleblowers have said.
I was just going to say that. And that issue of what the whistleblowers said and did interviews on this network and elsewhere and testified before Congress isn't what came up in court when the plea deal fell apart, but it really seems to be more and more relevant right now.
Yep.
So today we're going to be reacting to a CNN video about the Hunter Biden plea deal, special counsel, all this stuff put together. And they essentially have to do a mea culpa and say, hey, we were right all along. This all stings high hell. The whistleblowers seem to be right. This is, this is all crazy. So just let me give you a little background. Hunter Biden is essentially a foreign agent. I actually feel confident saying that he was actually a foreign agent. He was running around all around the world doing things like going to China and telling the Chinese, hey, if you want to be hooked up with my father, pay me money and I gotcha. And they paid him some money. Then he was in Ukraine. They're paying him money, like $50,000 a month from Burisma. So he's getting paid money something like millions and millions of dollars are flowing in. And then you got emails talking about, hey, I got to give, you got to give me more because I got to give a cut to the big guy. All this was put forward clearly. That was all out there, right? Hunter Biden. Okay. So the good people in the Delaware district, the federal district in Delaware, the U.S. attorney there, started investigating it 5 years ago. Well, during that investigation, it was kind of plain as day that Hunter Biden had evaded taxes. He had taken in millions of dollars and didn't put any of them on tax returns. It was clear as day. There was like tax fraud. There was some violations of the Foreign Registration Act because, again, when you're a foreign agent, when you work on behalf of a foreign government trying to lobby the American government, you have to register, and it's called FARA. He didn't register. And then let's not even talk about how when his father started running for president, the laptop came out. Now, anyone who knows the laptop story knows that social media is corrupt. The media is corrupt. They're all corrupt because the story was 100% legitimate. This is what happened. Hunter Biden went and took his laptop that was actually owned by the charity that was set up because his brother died, his brother Bo, who was the hero. So Hunter Biden takes the laptop to get it fixed or whatever, leaves it, forgets about it. The person who owns a laptop in this rickety store in Delaware, he says, okay, he opens it up and like, oh, there's all these pictures and all this drug deals and all this stuff, this person using drugs in there. I don't want to see all this. So he calls the FBI, FBI gets it, and they get the contents of the laptop. And that's where they get all the emails and all the other stuff. So they got all this incriminating evidence from this laptop. Now, the laptop, which was 100%, it wasn't misinformation. It wasn't Russian. It was none of that. The left put out, or the powers that be put out onto social media that, hey, the Russians had actually stole this information through a hack from Burisma. Now, why would the Burisma have all this Hunter Biden's, smoking crack on camera? Why would they have that in their files? But anyway, they said it was Russians had hacked Burisma, and this was hacked information, so it should be suppressed. So the New York Post, who actually did a full investigation on it, did this article, and the article was up everywhere. All social media companies scrubbed it. You couldn't share the link on any social media platform, Twitter, Facebook. It was gone. It was gone. And matter of fact, I did a video on it, and that video was demonetized immediately. Boom, 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 right? You couldn't do anything with that video, even though we all know where it came from. Now, Fox News reported on it. Everybody reported on it, but it was totally suppressed, right? Now, even though half the country knew that everything was legitimate, you still had the mainstream media saying that it was Russian misinformation. You still had social media claiming it's Russian information and totally suppressed it from anyone's sites. Then the election happened. Joe Biden wins. A couple of months later, now the mainstream media, trying to pretend that they're objective, now comes out and says, oh, guess what? The laptop story was real. We verified it. It was all good. And they think that we're supposed to buy that. So now, let's get back to Hunter. So now Hunter, after the laptop and all this more information comes out, it's obviously clear. Hunter's been committing major felonies from money laundering to, FARA violations. Now, even with the FARA, Michael Flynn, remember, he had to go down for that. He got convicted of FARA violations. So this is something serious. These are felony counts. So that all happens. Now, Hunter Biden's issues were so expansive that the DA in Delaware allegedly wanted to charge like major felonies against Hunter Biden, wanted to charge major felonies. But at the end, he came out with a sweetheart deal. So we had two IRS whistleblowers who essentially came forward and was like, hey, listen, Hunter Biden is getting a sweetheart deal. These are major felonies. We have major things of wrongdoing. And now they want him to plead out to two like low-level misdemeanors just because he's Hunter Biden, right? Because he's the president's son. Now, everybody from the top, Joe Biden, what's his name? Merrick Garland, they were all saying, no, we're not involved. This is all on the U.S. attorney in Delaware, whatever he does. Next thing you know, they have this sweetheart deal that says, hey, 2 misdemeanors. And you know what? Remember when you lied on that form saying you didn't use illegal drugs in the past and you got a gun? Well, that's also a felony too, but we'll wrap all that up in a nice little bow tie, let you plead guilty to the 2 felonies. We'll let you take a drug course or, get some rehab for the gun charge, I should say. And you got no issues, right? You got no issues. You're gone. So they go into court, and this judge looks at the plea deal and was like, oh, okay, so this wraps up everything, right? We're done. He can't be charged with anything else. Government's like, well, no. We got multiple ongoing investigations on like the money laundering, the FARA violations. We got a lot of stuff going on. This is just for this tax thing. And Hunter's lawyers went in there and said, no. This is for everything, right? He's pleading guilty to 2 crimes. He's done, right? All that stuff in the past is done. It's all wrapped up in the same thing. So we're done. We're done. So the judge is like, you're telling me it's done. You're telling me it's not. So then they went back, right? After the judge said, I'm not taking this. You guys got to go back and figure this out. They go back. Hunter goes back and says, hey, he wants everything to be, the 2 misdemeanors should be done for everything. The government is like, that's not going to happen. We got major felonies we're investigating. That's not going to happen. You're taking Chinese money. You're taking Ukrainian money. There may be even some Russian money involved. You're going around telling people you're getting paid to give the big man 10%. Those are major crimes. It's not being taken care of with just 2 misdemeanors. We got an issue here. So the deal breaks down. Now it looks like Hunter Biden is going to trial. So going to trial, election year, U.S. attorney is investigating. What can we do to limit the damage? Because that's essentially what we're talking about here. The Biden administration needs to limit the damage politically. So how do you do that? Well, he can just pardon them, right? He can say, all right, I'm pardoning him for all crimes against the feds. But then that hurts you politically, right? He's trying to run for re-election. That shows the corruption. So you want to kind of protect the big guy, the president, as much as possible. So you can't do that. You can't pardon just yet, right? If you're reelected, pardons all the way. You can't pardon him yet. So you got to say, okay, so what can I do now? Well, we can let this guy stay on and investigate. Okay, we'll let him stay on and investigate. But now, if he was just a U.S. attorney, then that would allow the Congress to bring him in and question him and, ask for documents and all that stuff. But if he was a special counsel, they wouldn't be able to do that. See, if he was special counsel, he would have to fully complete the investigation into all those different crimes. And then after he completes, he does a report, and then Congress will come bring him in and question him. Remember Robert Mueller and the Russia investigation? Remember all that time they couldn't bring him in and question him because he was doing the investigation. That's to keep the special counsel's office independent. So after that's all done, after the special counsel's done, then you could bring him in and say, hey, you report this, and have them question what's going on, but only afterwards. So what they've done essentially by making him special counsel is remove that oversight feature from Congress and says, okay, we're going to keep this investigation, now investigating, we keep it secret. And it also gives that aura of, hey, we're doing, we're stepping out of it. We're just going to let the special counsel do it and whatever he wants to do. Now, one interesting thing about the special counsel is that generally special counsel is not someone who already works for the government. And the reason why is because that's how they're supposed to be independent. It's not, there's not supposed to be this conflict of interest where if I work for the government and you don't want me to do X and I'm the special counsel, then, you know, my job is on the line if I don't do what you tell me to do. So generally, like Robert Mueller, he wasn't working for the government when they brought him in as special counsel. One of the more famous special counsels or independent counsel, that was Kenneth Starr. He didn't work for the government. He's worked outside the government, and they brought him in. That's so he didn't have, you know, if he was, let's say, the U.S. attorney in Delaware, then his job would be essentially on the line if he did the wrong thing. So that's why generally you would bring, if you're going to make somebody a special counsel, you would bring them in from the outside. But now the Biden administration elevated him to special counsel, so that means the attorney general is still his boss, and now he gets to investigate without any real congressional oversight. So that's kind of my spiel. I hope you guys understood that, but that's what's going on here. So now, let's look at how CNN is going to deal with this. Now, I do want to say one thing now. Prosecutors are always looking for deal, right? Because it saves time and money, and they have other cases that they have to also get rid of. So if you can get a plea deal, you'll ask for one. So it's not showing that the prosecutors have, you know, the way this is kind of coming across is like the prosecutors' case is weak. That's what they're coming to ask for a plea deal. I'm thinking, to be fair, I'm thinking based on the whistleblowers and now kind of how I'm seeing everything play out, I'm thinking there was pressure on the prosecutors to go make a deal with Hunter. They reached out and say, hey, can we resolve some of this stuff? And that's kind of why all this is falling apart, because people, you know, you can tell it's like, you know, they were being, it seems, again, I have no evidence of this, but it seems to me that prosecutors are being pressured and they put together a shitty deal, and now their shitty deal is blowing up, and now they're like, all right, so we, you know, because it seems like they actually wanted to go to trial. And I think the evidence is out there clear. Just Google it. Google the Hunter Biden evidence for, you know, all the emails and stuff, and you'll see it for yourself. I think it's clear. Like, for instance, the stuff with the tax stuff, it's obvious. It's obvious.
So they're obviously still hopeful that they're able to work out some kind of plea deal, but obviously the timing here is now very different.
Kara, can I take a step back here? Because I have a ton of questions about what this means or what it doesn't mean, if it's jurisdictionally related. What does the special counsel designation actually mean for Hunter Biden and for David Weiss going forward?
Well, what's interesting is that the Attorney General Merrick Garland and David Weiss have both said that he had authority to decide whether, when, and where to bring charges. Right. That goes to this question of venue, right? If it's not in Delaware, could they bring it in Washington or California? Now, the special counsel does make this now a formal arrangement versus him being told he had these powers, but it also gives him a budget. So he could hire more staff if he wants to. You know, it's also a big question of why now? What has changed? Is there different evidence? This investigation's been going on for 5 years. You know,
just to be clear, nothing has changed, right? The evidence is still the same. They have Hunter by the balls. It's just the political aspect of this is the problem.
Why now is still the big question that we don't have an answer from the Justice Department on, of what was it that made it important just now to do
an election.
But certainly means, for one thing, that this is not going to wrap up in a plea agreement in the next couple of weeks. This is clearly going to be a longer process.
Yeah, no question. Kara Scannell, thank you. Joining us now for our panel, national political reporter for the Associated Press, Michelle Price, White House correspondent for Reuters, Jeff Mason, and CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig. Ellie, I want to start with you. Special counsels, no matter how narrow the scope seems to be at the start, have a long history, or some iteration of a special counsel has a long history of expanding and creating major headaches, both legally and politically. What's your read on the intent behind this designation?
So they do have a history of sort of spinning out. And actually, I was just looking at the actual document DOJ signed, Merrick Garland signed, appointing David Weiss, saying, how limited is it? And it's not very limited. It basically says anything to do with the Hunter Biden investigation, which is quite broad. And Kara's...
Now, I want to be clear. The reason why it says anything to do with the Hunter Biden investigation, why it's quite broad, is because what they've essentially done is just wrap it by giving the special counsel everything. It seems to be, let's say, you know, we want to go, because remember, they don't need to go another 5 years. They just needed to go past the next election cycle. So that's why. So if you just pile on with everything, whatever Hunter Biden's name is spoken, then that can get you over that, because you remember, you don't want this trial to happen before Election Day. Just like Trump doesn't want his trials to happen before Election Day. So they are all betting, both sides. Now this is interesting because both sides, the Bidens and the Trumps, are both betting that if they can get these trials stalled until after Election Day, they'll be okay. It's crazy, right? That's the world we live in now.
Now that David Weiss has been named special counsel, he does have a bit more independence. It's not all that different from being a U.S. attorney, but he does have a bit more independence, separation from the attorney general. My big question, again, is Why? Why now? Why in a case that's been going on for 5 years?
5 years.
4 days ago, there was no need for special counsel. Now there is.
And that's the key point, too. Think about this. 4 days. Why do we need special counsel? Remember, if the evidence changes, then I understand. If the situation changes, I understand. But 4 days ago, you were going to wrap this up with 2 misdemeanors. Now you go from having 2 misdemeanors to a special counsel? That's a huge leap. That is a huge leap. And I don't know how they justify that.
And what DOJ said is the reason is, quote, extraordinary circumstances. Now that's pulled out of the law. What's extraordinary now that wasn't extraordinary 5 weeks ago when they were ready to go in court and wrap this up for a misdemeanor? So DOJ has botched this, in my view. Merrick Garland has botched this. And frankly, the way this has played out has actually lent credence to what the whistleblowers have said.
I was just going to say that. And that issue of what the whistleblowers said and did interviews on this network and elsewhere and testified before Congress isn't what came up in court when the plea deal fell apart, but it really seems to be more and more relevant.
Just so everybody understands, the whistleblowers said that Hunter was getting a sweetheart deal and that they were ignoring some of the other stuff to try to just push this thing through. And that's what the whistleblowers have been going around saying, and obviously that seems to be the case, right? It seems to be the case. It seems to be obvious.
Right now. I think it's also interesting, Jeff Mason, that if the Attorney General overrules the special counsel, as Ellie was informing me over the weekend, you get transparency. You have to tell Congress why you did it. And that's really important right now, is transparency. I want to play something that President Biden said. This was back on May 5th. It's from MSNBC. It's days before this original plea deal came down, about his son, Hunter. Here it is.
My son's done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him.
That's one hell of a statement, right? It's my son's done nothing wrong. Okay. But now they're naming a special counsel to investigate. And he was just about to, matter of fact, he wants to plead guilty to 2 crimes, right? 2 misdemeanors. And the gun, and wrap up the gun charge. So if you're saying he did nothing wrong, I don't. That seems like he did something wrong.
I know it's his son. He's also the president, and it is Merrick Garland. It is this Attorney General of this administration overseeing everything. So there are a lot of questions now about whether the president should be talking about this at all.
And he usually doesn't. And that's a comment that has not aged well, given the fact that his son ended up agreeing to a plea deal that has now, of course, fallen apart. The political ramifications of this are huge for President Biden, and it's certainly not what he wants to see, that this is going to be dragged out in the middle of the campaign now as he goes into the fall and into a general election next spring. And it's a political weakness for him, not only because of the fact that it will be a story, but because of what was exemplified in that quote. He loves his son, and he has a little bit of a blind spot for him. And that is something that you can understand for a father and son, but politically it's tricky.
So the good people at CNN have finally woken up to the Hunter Biden mess and said, hey, okay, this thing stinks. The special counsel stinks. It almost sound like Fox News. But I will say this. At the end of the day, we're living in a very interesting political time. And both sides are kind of walking that same balance. On one side, you have the Biden administration and the Hunter Biden stuff that could be a bomb. Because remember, the Hunter Biden stuff, it leads directly to Biden, but there's been no evidence of that connection. Even though Hunter Biden's been saying, I've got money for this, I got money, and alluding to he was working on behalf of the big guy, there's really no direct evidence that links the two. So that's what I think they're holding their hat on. And then you have on the Trump side, you have the Trump, or how many indictments? We have 4? We're at number 4 now. So we have the 4th indictment on the Trump side. So 4 indictments. So it comes down to this. If you can get to the election, because I think that's what this really is about. Biden wants to get to the election, and hopefully, and if he does, then the whole Hunter Biden issue goes away. Trump, if he gets to the election and wins, all the stuff that he's going through essentially goes away. That's what we're looking for. We're going on A and B. That's what I mean by it's interesting times, because both of these sides are actually playing in the criminal arena, and we just don't know what's going to happen. So we'll see. Let me know how you feel in the comment section. It's interesting because CNN actually, once in a while, what do they say? A broken clock is right twice a day. So CNN at least gives you some news sometimes. But I think the experts here are right. This stinks. They've botched this, and It's clearly easy to see that if 5 weeks ago you had all the same evidence, nothing's changed. 5 weeks ago, you're trying to plead him out to 2 low-level misdemeanors. And now you say, well, because of extraordinary circumstances, we want to we're going to institute a special counsel to give him all this independence. Then obviously there's something seriously going on here in the background that should be explored. And hopefully we'll be able to find it out. But with that said, don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all the great YouTube stuff. My name is Nick DeLorean, and I'm going to see you next time. Peace.